Welcome to Crime Whisper, your place for softly told mysteries and crimes, when the world is quiet and you're ready to drift. Where are you watching from tonight? What time is it there? Are you already lying in bed? If you feel the night settling in, please take a moment to like the video, leave a sleepy little comment below, and subscribe for more whispered stories. Now, take a deep breath, lie back, close your eyes, turn off the lights, let your body relax, and let this story drift over you like a soft breeze of time. Rain deepens slightly, tone shifts darker. But what if you were being hunted, and no one believed you? A nurse, found bound and bruised, 7 separate attacks, and yet no one was ever charged. Was Cindy James the victim of a long, slow murder, or the author of a terrible illusion? Tonight, we whisper the haunting case of Cindy James. The house was small, tucked beneath trees that whispered to each other in the Vancouver night. Cindy James sat on the edge of her bed, fingers curled tightly around a mug of cooling tea. The warmth no longer reached her skin. She had that feeling again, the one she couldn't explain. She wasn't alone. There was no sound, no broken window, no open door. But her body knew. A presence, just beyond the edges of light. Her eyes scanned the shadows of her hallway. A breath caught in her throat. Then, a knock. Just one. Sharp. Deliberate. She jumped to her feet. No one should be there. No one had called. No footsteps before it. She crept to the front door, peeked through the peephole. Nothing. Another knock came, this time from the back. She froze. Her heart thudded violently. And then, the phone rang. When she answered, it was breathing. Heavy. Controlled. Waiting. She slammed it down. But it rang again. And again. Sometimes, there were no words. Sometimes, just a voice that whispered her name. This was just the beginning. Cindy was being watched, and no one believed her. 2 weeks later, the first attack happened. Cindy had just returned home from her shift at the local hospital. The hallway was quiet. She felt dizzy, strange. Moments later, the world tilted. She woke up in the basement, hands bound, feet tied, a black stocking wrapped around her throat. The police arrived quickly. There were bruises, rope burns, but the house was locked. No sign of forced entry. Cindy told them she had been attacked, drugged. She remembered shadows, a needle prick, whispers in the dark. But the officers looked at her differently now. They asked if she'd been drinking, taking pills. When she said no, they wrote in silence. And when she cried, they didn't offer a tissue. To the police, it didn't add up. But to Cindy, the terror was only growing. Her body knew something real had happened, but her world was starting to doubt her.
The days passed, and the messages came. Notes left on her doorstep. Letters slid under her car wipers. Soon, you won't survive the next one. One letter simply said, die. She showed them to the police. They were bagged as evidence. But suspicion lingered. Cindy's friends began to whisper. Was she making it up? Was this a cry for help or attention? She was sent for psychological evaluation. And though doctors found anxiety, they did not find delusion. Still, comma doubt clung to her like a second skin. Her ex-husband, Dr. Roy Makepeace, was concerned. But distant. He too had received calls. Threats. But no one else had seen what Cindy saw. Or felt what she felt at night. She bought a dog, installed new locks, changed her number. But the watcher always found her. The calls began again. Breathing. Whispers. Sometimes growling. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was dread. Cold, constant, heavy.
It was just after 10:00 p.m. Cindy had taken her dog, Heidi, out into the backyard for the last walk of the night. The moonlight shimmered faintly across the grass. Heidi sniffed the air, ears twitching. Then, a growl. The dog darted to the fence, barking, furious. Cindy stepped forward, heart racing. There, beyond the garden hedge, a shadow. A figure, tall, unmoving, just standing in the dark. She called out, "Who's there?" No answer. The figure didn't flinch. It watched. Heidi barked louder, her body shaking. Then the figure slowly stepped back, fading into the blackness between the trees. Gone. Cindy locked the door, pulled the curtains tight. She didn't sleep that night. And in the morning, a note was taped to her window. It read, "You looked right at me." Time began to change for Cindy. She started losing hours, driving without memory of where she'd gone, finding herself in parking lots, side streets. Once, she awoke in a ditch, a needle mark on her arm, shoes missing, a men's work boot print nearby. The police came again. They found her dazed, confused, rope burns around her wrist. Her mouth was swollen, her tongue bruised. Another note was found in her car. "You talk too much." But this time, investigators took a different tone. They asked if she'd done this to herself. But why would she? Cindy had a career, a life. She was known as kind, gentle, never one to seek attention. But the more she reported, the less they believed. In her diary, she wrote, "I'm afraid that they'll kill me. And no one will believe it wasn't suicide." Cindy's ex-husband, Dr. Roy Makepeace, was brought back into the investigation, a psychiatrist, calm, measured. He told police he believed Cindy. He claimed to have received threats too, even recordings. On one tape, a distorted voice hissed, "Leave her alone, or you're next." The voice was guttural, like it came from behind clenched teeth. Roy believed someone was stalking Cindy. He told detectives she was living in terror, but others weren't so sure. One officer confided to a colleague, "She's clever, maybe too clever." Still, the attacks escalated. Slashed pillows, cut phone lines, dead cats left in her yard. And then, a note nailed to her front door. It read simply, "Soon." By early 1983, Cindy had changed. She walked differently, flinched at sounds, smiled less. The world felt like it was closing in. She no longer trusted phones or cars. Even her mind began to feel like it wasn't her own. There were nights she sat on the floor for hours, back to the wall, lights off, waiting for the knock. And sometimes it came. Other times it didn't. She started recording things, notes on what she ate, when she slept, who she saw, but the gaps kept growing. She'd black out, lose time. Her hands would shake for no reason. At work, she grew quieter. Friends said she looked haunted. One co-worker said, Her eyes always looked over your shoulder, like she was listening for something. The strange calls returned, more frequent, always terrifying. And always just silence, then a hiss, a whisper, "You'll be mine forever." One afternoon, Cindy was found near her home, semi-conscious, shoelaces tied around her wrists and ankles, a nylon stocking, again, knotted around her neck. A man walking his dog spotted her in a ditch near her front lawn. She was dazed, confused, mumbling, the hose from her garden stuffed into her mouth. When police arrived, she couldn't explain how she got there, or who did it. Once again, no fingerprints, no forced entry, no witness. The officers raised their eyebrows. "How does someone tie themselves up? This neatly?" one asked. A local doctor examined her. No drugs were found in her system. Still, the stocking had left deep bruising. She was injured, afraid, but her credibility, slipping. To the world, Cindy was becoming less a victim and more a mystery. Was someone really stalking her? Or was the enemy inside her? Her sister Melanie wanted to help. She begged Cindy to come live with her, to escape the shadows. Cindy agreed. For a few months, the calls stopped. The notes vanished. No shadows in the windows. She even smiled again. A real human smile. But it didn't last. One night, the phone rang. Melanie picked it up. A voice said, "We see you," and hung up. 2 days later, Cindy's car was found down the street. Seat slashed. A note left under the windshield wiper. Back to the police. More interviews. More questions. But their tone had changed. Now it wasn't concern. It was suspicion. "She's clever," one officer said again. "Maybe she's playing us." Cindy broke down during questioning, exhausted, paranoid, terrified. But no matter how many times she said, "I'm not doing this," the silence that followed always felt like disbelief. The wind rattled the window frames that April night. Cindy had just finished another police interview. She sat alone at her dining table, pen trembling in her hand, writing everything she could remember. Then, silence broke. The phone rang once and stopped. Moments later, the doorbell rang. Twice. She didn't move. The air in the house felt thick. She turned on every light, walked from room to room, but saw nothing. Only her reflection in the dark glass, pale, flickering. Then, hours later, she was found again. Shoelaces binding her arms, stocking around her neck. A knife slashed across her blouse, lying beside a note pinned to her nightstand. "Next time, you die." She told police she had been abducted, driven around, and dumped. But her car was in the driveway. No signs of a break-in. Her story, becoming too familiar, too rehearsed, they thought. But her body still told a different truth. Bruised, shaking, frightened. It was as if something terrible had happened, and no one was truly listening. Cindy agreed reluctantly to enter a mental health facility for observation, to rest, to be believed. Her doctor feared for her life. Not because she was suicidal, but because she seemed trapped by something no one could quite define. In her sessions, Cindy spoke of shadows, of a man whose face she couldn't see, of whispers that started as dreams and followed her into the day. But she never claimed to be hallucinating. She never said she made anything up, only that someone was trying to destroy her. The nurses noted how polite she was, how kind, how exhausted. Some believed she was suffering from dissociation, a defense mechanism when reality becomes too painful. Still, she was released because she insisted, "It's not in my head. It's outside, watching, always watching." After her release, Cindy moved into a new apartment, smaller, higher up, harder to access. She thought, maybe here she'd finally be safe. She painted the walls herself, hung wind chimes on the balcony, burned lavender at night, but the peace never truly came. A week after the move, she came home to find her pillows slashed, her new dog, Muffin, trembling under the bed. A note stuck to the fridge with a steak knife. It said, "You can't run from me." She called the police again, but this time, even they were weary. They questioned her more than they investigated, took photos, but no fingerprints, wrote a report, then left. That night, Cindy stared into her bathroom mirror, looking for answers. But all she saw was herself. Fading. In the fall of 1984, a new twist emerged. A package arrived at the police station. No return address, no fingerprints. Inside, a cassette tape. Detectives played it in a quiet room. The hiss of recording static filled the air. Then came the voice, distorted, raspy, like gravel being dragged across metal. It said, "You can't save her. You never could. She belongs to me." The voice sometimes sounded male, sometimes not human at all, animalistic. Experts analyzed it. The accent was hard to place. No background noise, no location hints. The police showed the tape to Cindy. She nodded slowly. "That's him. That's the one who's been calling me." But even with that tape, no suspects, no arrests. The mystery didn't narrow. It only deepened, with no leads. The police turned to something else. The polygraph. The lie detector. They asked Cindy to take the test 3 times. She agreed. The questions were pointed. Are you making up the attacks? Do you know who the attacker is? Have you harmed yourself? Her results, inconclusive. Twice. But on the 3rd attempt, a technician noted high stress markers. Sweat, rapid heart, but not deception. Some believed she was telling the truth. Others said she was just very good at lying. Still, they pressed her. "You can tell us the truth now, Cindy," an officer said softly. "We can help you." But her eyes filled with tears. "You're not the one I'm afraid of," she whispered. And that was the end of the conversation. Cindy moved again. This time to a rented house near a main road. She thought the visibility, the noise, might protect her. She installed motion lights, security cameras, a double deadbolt. Still, the feeling never left, that she was being watched. She covered her mirrors at night, unplugged the phone. But even then, the static returned, sometimes through the walls. One night she called her brother in tears. "He's in the house. I know he is." Her brother rushed over. No one was there. Everything was locked, but the window in the guest room was open. Later that week, the neighbor's cat was found strangled in Cindy's garden, a red ribbon tied around its neck. She didn't speak for hours after that. She just stood at the window, watching, waiting. It was January 1985. The cold bit hard that winter in Richmond, British Columbia. Cindy was quiet, withdrawn. But one night, that quiet turned into flame. Her home, the one she'd tried to make safe, caught fire in the middle of the night. Smoke curled under her bedroom door. Flames licked the curtains. Windows cracked with heat. She escaped through the back door, barefoot in the snow. When firefighters arrived, they found something strange. The fire seemed to have started in the basement, near a mattress. Gasoline had been poured along the edges of the carpet. Cindy said she had seen someone running away, a man in black, but no one else saw him. The police raised an eyebrow. "Why didn't your dog bark?" they asked. "Why didn't you call us?" She shook. "I ran," she whispered. "Wouldn't you?" The truth flickered in the smoke, but no one could say for sure. If it was arson, or something else entirely, the fire was only the beginning. After that, the letters came daily, taped to her car, tucked into her mailbox. One found in her kitchen, though she'd changed all the locks. They weren't just threats now. They were commands. Stop telling. No more talking. Be silent, or burn. Cindy saved every note. Neatly folded, catalogued, logged. But each one drained her a little more. She stopped wearing makeup, cut her hair short, stopped answering her phone. One night, her sister found her sitting in the dark, a dozen torn letters in her lap, a candle burning to the wick. "They'll never stop," she whispered, "even if I do." She was unraveling, and no one, not even those closest to her, knew how to help. In the spring, Cindy stopped speaking altogether. Not to her family, not to her counselor, not to the police. They called it selective mutism, but her eyes said more than words ever could. When asked a question, she would write her answers down, painfully, slowly, one word at a time. She feared that her voice, even her breath, was being monitored, that he was listening. And then came the most disturbing attack yet. She was found again, unconscious, shoelaces around her wrists, stocking tied tightly at the neck, a syringe beside her. Inside it, an unknown drug. She had no memory of how she got there, or what had been done to her. Her body told a story, but her voice remained locked away. The police filed another report, but behind closed doors, they used the word staging. To them, it was performance. To Cindy, it was war. By the winter of 1986, Cindy James had become a ghost in her own life. She moved again, this time to a high-rise building with cameras and doormen. No garden, no alley, no back door, only glass and height and silence. She worked less, slept more. Friends said her eyes were ringed with shadows. She rarely left the apartment. When she did, she looked over her shoulder constantly, paranoid, fractured, but still alive. And then, one day, she vanished. Her car was found parked neatly in a shopping center, keys in the ignition, groceries in the trunk, blood on the driver's seat. But no Cindy, no body, no footprints, no sign of struggle. The engine was still warm. She had disappeared into thin air. For 6 long days, there was nothing. No phone calls, no sightings, no ransom. Cindy's family searched. The police issued a statement. The newspapers ran her photo again. But most people had stopped believing in the story. They whispered things like, "She staged it. she's hiding somewhere. It's for attention. But her sister Melanie didn't believe that. Not for a second. She said, Cindy was terrified, but she wanted to live. She had no reason to disappear. None. The police combed the city, checked flights, ferries, hospitals. Nothing. It was like she had vanished into mist, the kind that hovers just above the surface, then fades when you reach for it. But the truth, or something like it, was waiting nearby. On the 7th day, a maintenance worker saw something near an abandoned house. Behind the house, in the weeds, they found her, Cindy James. Face turned to the sky, shoes missing, hands and feet tied behind her back, stocking pulled tight around her neck, needle marks in her arm. She was dead. The groceries from her car were nearby, still packed, rotting in the summer heat. Police were baffled. How could she have tied herself up like that and walked to that place on her own? The autopsy was confusing. She had multiple drugs in her system. Morphine, flurazepam, enough to render her unconscious, but not instantly. She could have walked, but not far. And the knot on the stocking, experts said it could have been self-inflicted, but it would have been extremely difficult. Her death was ruled not a suicide, but not a murder. Official cause, unknown. And just like that, Cindy James was gone. Cindy James's body was buried before the story ever found its ending. Investigators were divided. Some believed she had died by her own hand, a final act of surrender after years of torment. But others weren't so sure. The knots were too precise, the drugs too well measured, the setting too deliberate. Her sister Melanie screamed at the press. Cindy didn't want to die. She wanted the attacks to stop. An independent coroner's inquest was called. 5 weeks of testimony, 80 witnesses, dozens of theories. Was she mentally ill? Was it a slow suicide crafted over years? Or was she the perfect victim of the perfect stalker? The answer never came. The jury ruled it an unknown event. Neither murder nor suicide. Just silence. And that silence echoed louder than any truth ever could. Among all the speculation, one name kept returning. Dr. Roy Makepeace, Cindy's ex-husband, the quiet psychiatrist, the last person to speak with her. He had received threats too, voicemails, notes. He had supported her claims, and yet he refused a polygraph, never let them search his property. Police never charged him, never even named him publicly, but privately. Some believed he knew more than he said. Still, there was no evidence, no fingerprints, no motive strong enough. Roy said, she was afraid, but I don't know who of. To this day, he remains a shadow figure, standing just outside the spotlight. Neither guilty nor innocent, just unanswered. Cindy's diaries were found after her death, stacked neatly in her closet. Hundreds of pages. She had written everything. Dates, times, descriptions, calls, attacks, dreams, fears. Some pages were stained with tears. Others were torn from the edges. She wrote, "They say I'm lying, but I am being hunted. And if I die, it wasn't an accident." Her handwriting trembled over time. Letters got smaller, sentences less structured. Near the end, she no longer wrote in full sentences, only fragments. Him, again, door unlocked. He knows where I am. Her words were all that remained. But words aren't always enough to prove a truth. After Cindy's death, the media was everywhere. Her photo, once known only to friends and family, now stared out from every newspaper in the country. Woman found bound and dead. Mystery of Cindy James. Suicide or murder. At first the world was curious, but curiosity fades, and soon opinions formed. Hard, cruel, final. People said she faked it, that she was manipulative, that she just wanted attention. Her family read those headlines in silence. Melanie refused to speak publicly again. Her parents moved. Her co-workers stopped talking about her. And just like that, Cindy began to disappear again. Not from life, but from memory. Only those who truly knew her remembered the truth. A kind, gentle woman. A nurse. A sister. A daughter. Terrified. Alone. And above all, unheard. Years later, some of the original officers returned to the case, quietly, privately, some out of guilt, others regret. One detective said, "We dismissed her too early, too completely." They reviewed the files, photographs, notes, autopsy reports, dozens of calls, hundreds of interviews, and a pattern emerged, but no answers. Every piece of evidence was just a little too neat, too precise, or too unbelievable. The bruises were real, the terror undeniable, but the timeline, the isolation, the vanishings, it didn't fit into any simple story. And that made it harder to believe, or maybe too frightening to accept. No charges were ever filed. The case was quietly closed, and the file was marked Unsolved. To this day, people still whisper about Cindy James. Her case appears on forums, in documentaries, on lists of unsolved mysteries. But it's no longer about evidence, or conclusions, or proof. It's about what if. What if someone really was stalking her? What if the system failed her? What if her cries were mistaken for performances? What if she was right all along? The truth may never come, but the story lingers, like a cold wind that brushes the back of your neck in the dark. A voice on the other end of the line, a whisper in the night, and a woman, alone, afraid, bound in silence, still waiting to be heard. Cindy James didn't leave behind a confession or a letter, only fragments, photos of her smiling in her nurse's uniform, notes written in careful, trembling hands, drawings she sketched during therapy, faces without eyes, doors without keys. Her case file still sits in a cold archive, yellowed with time, marked with the same question again and again. Did we miss something? Her friends still remember her laughter, how she loved animals, how she hummed to herself when nervous. But most of all, they remember the fear, that deep, impossible fear that seemed to follow her everywhere. No one ever took her place. No one ever confessed. No one was ever charged. All that remains is a name and a mystery. Over the years, the silence surrounding Cindy's death grew louder, not because of new evidence, but because of the lack of it. People stopped asking who did it, and began asking, did we fail her? Was her story too strange to be true, or too true to be believed? Her parents passed away, never knowing what happened. Her sister still says, she didn't do this to herself. She fought, every single day. And maybe that's the saddest part. Cindy James cried for help, again and again. But the world kept asking for proof. Proof beyond bruises, beyond fear, beyond tears. What if the fear itself was the evidence? What if we only believe victims when it's too late? And so the story ends, not with justice, not with answers, but with stillness. Cindy James remains a question whispered by time, a name written in fog, a voice on the edge of belief. Was she a victim of her own mind, or a woman stalked, tortured, silenced? The truth lies somewhere in between what we know and what we feel to be true. Tonight, as you lie in the quiet, let her story drift away like a feather on a breeze. Let the fear fade. Let the pain settle. Let the mystery sleep. And let Cindy, wherever she may be, finally rest.